This is my Rg770G. So what is an Rg770G? In the early days of the RG, the 550 and the 570 were the first two models introduced. Those are still iconic classic guitars today. They've been reissued God knows how many times. I guarantee you've seen one. If you haven't, I'll throw some pictures of them up on the screen now. But the 550 and the 570 were the OG RGs, if you will. The 700 RG models, which would be the 750, the 760, and the 770, those models were introduced, I think, a year or two later, and they were the first models in the RG line that were a step up from the RG 550 and 570. The 700 series RGs had a few things that the 500s didn't. The shark tooth inlays. This is not a shark fin inlay, as I believe Jackson probably had dibs on calling an inlay a shark fin in the 80s. So this is the shark tooth inlay. It's very different. In addition, you have binding on the neck. That is on the 700s, it's not on the 500s. Down to the body, the main differences between the 700s and the 500s in the RG line was the pickups. Ibanez used own brand pickups in the 500 series RGs. In particular, I believe they came with the V7, the V8, and I think in the middle they called it the S1. These did not have Ibanez own brand pickups. These are what are called IBZ USA pickups. Now, IBZ USA is actually DiMarzio. This is the F4, the C3, and the F2. Last but not least, and this is not true of all of the 700 RGs, but it is true of this model and a couple of the other ones, you can see that this has a Low Pro Edge. This is not the regular Ibanez Edge Tremolo like you would have found on the 550s and 570s. This is the low profile version that was introduced a little bit later. It is much flatter to the body than the original Edge. This particular model is the 770G, and the G stands for gold hardware, and you can see this hardware is gold. It is all gold, 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 with a couple little black accents on it. This guitar came in three colors. One of them was black. One of them was, I believe they called it Midnight Wine. It's like a deep burgundy red. And this color, which is Cosmic Blue. So why do I have this particular guitar? I am a big-time sucker and nerd when it comes to the early RGs, particularly the early 90s ones. One of the very first resources that I ever had that taught me about guitar was a big old book that I borrowed from my local library when I was a young kid, probably 12, 13. In that book, there were a lot of pictures of guitars from the early to mid-90s. And in particular, the pictures of Ibanez guitars always captured my attention. I thought they just looked the coolest. The Steve Vai guitars, the Gem and the Universe, and there were some pictures of RGs as well. I was listening to a lot of nu metal bands, Linkin Park, etc., Korn. A lot of those guys were playing Ibanez. So I'm always on the hunt for 90s RGs. If you've been paying any attention to the prices of used guitars over the last year or so since our global health crisis began, it is bananas. Old Ibanez is no exception. I did, however, come across this particular guitar, and I was unable to resist the temptation. I actually sold the Jackson and the Indonesian Ibanez that I have previously reviewed on this channel to fund this purchase. I had a little money left over after that, but that's how bad I wanted this, and I got it. This guitar was in near mint condition, and this is a 25-year-old guitar. You just don't see that very often. Almost no scratches on the entire body. The only noticeable marks on it are there's a couple of little scratches on the back. You can just barely see there. There's like one other ding right over here. and like that's it. The frets were immaculate. There is no fret wear. I mean, if there's any fret wear on this guitar, it has been put on there by me in the last couple of months. Very surprising to see a guitar this old in that good of shape. The guitar actually came with the original Japanese hang tags that would have been in the store that sold it in the 90s. So that was really cool as well. That added a little bit of a mojo factor to the whole thing for me. This guitar has a figured neck. So that is not a spec, that's just luck. I've seen this on other 700s before, but it's definitely not on all of them. But the neck does have a visible flame on it. It is not a super pronounced flame, but you do see it while you're playing it, especially if you have the light at the right angle, and it is gorgeous. It's a nice, subtle flame. I saw this and I thought I had to have it. So I got it. So how do I like this guitar? Is it everything I ever dreamed that it would be and more? Or is it a complete piece of garbage? As with most things in life, the truth is somewhere in the middle. Firstly, in terms of how this guitar plays and feels. Mwah! Chef kiss. Excellent. This is, bar none, the best playing guitar that I have ever owned. This guitar plays like a dream. This has the thinnest, shreddiest neck imaginable. This is the original Wizard neck, 17 millimeters at the first fret, 19 millimeters at the 12th fret. It does not get much skinnier than that. It really doesn't. This is a thin neck, and it feels extremely fast. I'll just throw up a couple more neck specs I forgot to mention. So it's a 25.5-inch scale. The nut width is 43 millimeters. That is fairly wide. The radius of the fretboard is 17 inches. That is quite flat and shreddy. Ibanez was one of the first manufacturers to make one that flat. And if you don't know, the Wizard neck profile is a very, very thin D shape. The finish on the neck is a gloss. That's different from some of the later Japanese RGs in the Prestige line. They started to use a little bit more of a satin finish on them. Sometimes people associate a gloss neck with like a sticky feel. It feels so slow. My hands are getting stuck on the gloss. Not on this guitar. Not this one. This is a very, very nice gloss finish neck. It feels buttery smooth. It's great. I also have to give high marks to the all-access neck joint. This is the best. This is the best neck joint. I think if you get a J Custom RG, if you're willing to shell out like $2,500, $3,000, they actually make this a little smaller, but I mean, you're splitting hairs at that point. This is essentially the closest that you're gonna get on a bolt-on guitar to it feeling neck through. The upper fret access, as I mentioned on my previous RG review, it just doesn't get any better than that. The sound of the guitar as well is pretty excellent. 99% of the time, being a meathead shred guy, I am on the full bridge or the full neck pickup. Very rarely do I use the in-between positions. The bridge pickup on this, the F2, is a very full sounding humbucker. It definitely has a little bit more meat behind it, a little bit more output than something like, I think it's the V8 is the bridge pickup in the 550s and the 570s. I don't remember. The neck humbucker is nice and sweet. You can get those smooth shred tones out of the neck pickup with very minimal effort. From what I have read and understand, DiMarzio never really made other pickups that were exactly like these. The F4 purportedly is quite similar to a PAF Pro. The F2, the closest model that they make to that is the Tone Zone, and the C3 is very close to a True Velvet. I can't vouch for that. I'm just telling you what other people have said. To me, they sound good. They're good pickups. Another advantage of this guitar that I really, really, truly love is the bridge, and that is the Low Pro Edge. I talked positively in my Jackson review about how I thought that the Floyd Rose 1000 series in that guitar was a good, double locking tremolo, and it is, but this is a great one. The difference in how this feels and how the Floyd 1000 feels is like going from like a B to 101% A++. This is the best double locking tremolo that I've ever had on any guitar. The tuning stability is phenomenal. I can abuse this and it just does not go out of tune. Once the strings are worn in, it does not matter what I do to this, the guitar stays in tune. I can dive bomb, I can pull up, I can beat on it to flutter like I'm trying to like karate chop it into oblivion. It just stays in tune. And what more can you ask? I also like the way that the bar works. This is a push-in bar, and it's in there so tight that I'm having a hard time getting it out. So it's got the little plastic washers on it that keep it in place. You just shove it in with your palm of your hand. It's in there, and it does not move. You can put it up there, you can shake the guitar, that thing is not swiveling down. You can put it there, so that it is easier to do those flutter effects, and it is not going to swing towards the ground. It stays put, the bar goes exactly where you want it to at any time. That is just so much better of a system than the screw-in arm. It's a much better design, not to mention the feel. If you've ever played a guitar with a Floyd, you will know that it's raised up towards the back. You see where the little fine tuner screws are? On a Floyd Rose, and also on an original Ibanez Edge, that pokes up quite a bit. And you feel that kind of on the edge of your hand when you're doing palm mutes or your hands down there. The Low Pro Edge, it is borderline flat as a pancake. Like, you do not feel anything. So obviously the looks of the guitar are the main thing that drew me to it, and I'm not sick of them yet. I don't know if I will get sick of them. The paint color is just great. It is a very deep blue, bordering on purple. It looks purple in some lights. In very, very specific light conditions, it does look purple. It is hard to get on camera. The metallic Ibanez logo on the headstock really pops. That's a nice touch. It's got a really cool streaky rosewood fretboard, and of course you gotta love the fin inlays going all the way up to the 24th fret. That just screams cool shred guitar. It's not super flashy looking. With the gold hardware, obviously it's a little bit flashy. It's just classy enough, I think, without looking garish. The frets, for a 25-year-old guitar, I mean, you cannot ask for better frets than this. The fret work from the factory, I'm assuming, I don't think the frets on this have really ever been touched, is great. Nothing sticks out. There is binding, so of course you wouldn't expect anything to stick out. With optimal neck relief, which is pretty much flat, I can get the action quite low, about 1.25 millimeters on the 12th fret of the first string, and just a little bit more, about 1.5 millimeters on the 12th fret of the 6th string. If it were a perfect world, I think I'd like it about 1 on the first string and 1.25 on the 6th, but this is close. The quality of the binding is quite good. I don't really notice too many tooling marks in it. There's 1 or 2 kind of up by the 12th fret. Obviously, tooling marks on the binding are not going to affect the playability of the guitar, but it's nice that when you look down, you don't see anything funny. However, my experiences with this guitar have not been 100% positive. I have to talk about some of the issues that I had with it. I love the guitar, but I'm going to give you the whole story here. So this guitar had the original electronics in it, and they were not good. So the original volume pot, tone pot, 5-way selector switch, and output jack, half of those have been replaced out of necessity, and I have only had this guitar since February. It is currently June. I played the guitar for a couple of hours when I first unboxed it. Obviously, you're excited. You got a new guitar, you want to play it. And all of a sudden, I went to switch the pickup from the bridge to the neck, and I had half volume. The output literally halved. I thought, that's weird. So I jiggled the selector switch, and the output came back. I end up opening the thing up after I've tried to fix it the first time. The wires are literally coming off of the solder joints. Like, this was a factory solder job, and I guess maybe it's just not built to last 25 years, but the wires were coming off. The solder joints were that bad. I resoldered it, or had it resoldered, I should be honest. I took it to a tech. My soldering skills are pathetic. So I took it to a tech who resoldered it, and it seemed like it was fine, and then in a month, it started doing it again. So I had to take it back again, and they put in an all-new 5-way selector switch. They just trashed the original one, and they put in an all-new selector switch, and now it works fine. But they also had to replace the volume pot, which I had noticed before I took it in the second time, was cutting out at 50%. So if you turned it down past 50%, it went silent. So, that's half the electronic components on this guitar I had to replace within the first 4 months that I owned it. That's not ideal. And I know those are relatively cheap parts, but that's still not really something that you should have to do, replace the electronics when you just bought a guitar, whether it's a nice one or not. It's time-consuming, it's irritating, you shouldn't have to do it. I will say this. This was a 25-year-old guitar. I am willing to accept that some of the parts are going to not hold up great over time. However, for as high-end of a guitar as this was in 1995, I was actually surprised at how cheap the internals actually were. The wiring was really kind of a rat's nest, and the pots were little alpha pots. If you're not familiar, alpha pots, and they're not bad pots, but they're small, and they're cheap, and they're not really built to be super durable. Buyer beware. The electronics in an old Ibanez were not made to last 25 plus years. Do not be surprised if you have to replace yours. I have heard of other people having similar issues on other, like, pre-prestige Japanese RGs. So caveat emptor, you might have to replace some of the electronic doodads in there. Another area that I'm not super in love with, the locking nut, as you can see up here, is not actually 100% lined up. It slightly sticks out on this side of the guitar, and I'll put up B-roll so you can see that better. You can catch your thumb on that if you're sliding down from a high fret to a low fret, and you're playing notes down here all of a sudden. It sticks out just enough that you can do that. It's not so bad that I'm constantly doing it. It's not something that happens every time I pick up the guitar and play. But it has happened, and I have definitely scuffed my thumb on it more than once. I tried taking the nut off and putting it back on, and it just does not go in unless that part is sticking off. So I don't know what happened there. I don't know what I would have to do to remedy that problem. I guess I could order a new locking nut. This, unlike the electronics, I don't think can be chalked up to age. I think that just slipped through QC, and it shouldn't have. This is not really a negative, but as you take a look at the maple neck here, you can see that at the scarf joint, right where the locking nut is fastened, you have those two bolts that go all the way through, and there is no volute. So you have a very thin neck up here at the location of the locking nut with very little reinforcement. I don't mind that. I mean, I don't gig much, or frankly at all, anymore. However, if I did gig a lot and I rocked out as hard as Korn does, I might run into a situation, as they did, where the neck will crack in this particular area. So if you get an old RG like this, again, that's just something to be wary of. They improved that design later on the Prestige models. I don't think this is a huge issue. I mean, lots of people play these live all the time, and they never run into that problem, but it's a possibility on these models, whereas it would not be on a later RG. One of the only ways that this guitar has aged visibly since it was made in 1995 is a slight patina on the gold hardware. That will happen in general to gold hardware over time. It will oxidate I don't know which word's right. I'm not a science teacher. I forgot science class. That just happens to gold hardware over time. It is what it is. And this probably looks better than 99.9% of the old guitars with gold hardware that are out there. Just a note that if you're thinking about buying an old guitar with gold hardware, don't expect it to look super pristine, because it's just not gonna. Overall, what do I think of this guitar? Despite the several notable flaws that I have talked at length about, I really love playing this guitar. I'm willing to overlook all that stuff because this is a guitar that has, for me anyway, a ton of mojo. It makes me feel cool when I play it. If I ever get another RG, I think I would want to make the leap up to J Custom if I ever got another one. The J Customs have the Tree of Life inlay and very figured tops and things like that that they don't offer on the Prestiges. So maybe someday, if I have $2 to $3 grand to blow on a guitar, I'll buy a nice J Custom. However, in the meantime, I am more than happy to settle for this. If you want to seek one out, be prepared to part with probably, depending on which model of 770 in particular, probably between $900 and $1,200. 4 or 5 years ago, you probably could have had anything you wanted in the old RG line for less than $900. But it ain't the olden days no more. Stuff is selling for 1.5 to 2 times the price that it would have, like, even 3 or 4 years ago. It's nutso. And that's all I have for you for today. Thank you for watching. Do all that stuff that people always tell you to do in the YouTube video. You like, you leave a comment, you subscribe. You can do all that. I'm not gonna lie and say it helps me out. I'm never gonna make any money off this anyway. It just makes me happy to know that things that I make are helping other people make purchasing decisions on their guitars, or I'm just providing you with some kind of enjoyment, or at the very least a distraction from this miserable, terrible world that we all find ourselves living in. I hope you have a wonderful day. I will see you again soon. I'll be playing guitar. I'll be making some music or something. I don't know what I'll be doing, but I'll be doing something. And I will see you. Until we meet again.